What's going on, everyone? Today I'm going to be giving you a spoiler-free review for Shazam: Fury of the Gods, of course, the Shazam sequel, which just recently released. We will go over some minor spoilers towards the end of the video, but I'm going to keep it spoiler-free until then. Just don't really see the point of doing a whole separate video because there's really not that many spoilers to talk about, so just make sure to skip that little end part if you do not want to hear any spoilers. With that being said, let's get into the positives. First thing I want to say, going into this movie, I did have very low expectations. I would actually say it was the complete opposite experience compared to Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, where for that movie, I was expecting a lot. I was expecting an amazing film, something really truly outstanding for the MCU, and it just ended up being kind of a dud. It wasn't terrible, it just was not nearly as good as I was hoping. Whereas for this film, I had little to no excitement for it. I didn't think the trailers were that interesting. Even though I really loved the first one, I just didn't really have that much interest in what they were doing here. And I ended up enjoying it a lot more than I was expecting. So it's kind of like the opposite experience as what I had for Ant-Man 3. The movie did have the same charm as the first one. I will say right off the bat, I do not like it more than the first one. I really like the first one, but this one definitely kept the same charm. It's a very family-friendly superhero film, and I know not everyone's gonna like that. If you're not into that type of stuff, yeah, you probably want to skip this one. It's definitely not gonna be a gritty, grounded sort of a superhero film. It's not like that at all. This movie is very jokey, very, let's have fun. Let's just have fun with this concept and just go for it. Like, that's kind of what this is. It's definitely very good for, a whole family. Kids of all ages are going to enjoy it, that type of thing, which is usually not the type of thing I like. You guys know me. I prefer those type of movies I was just talking about where they're more serious, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to enjoy a movie like this every now and then. And every now and then I do want a movie like this where it's just kind of like, just have fun with it. It's family friendly. I'm not expecting R-rated humor. A lot of the jokes are childish jokes, but at the end of the day, I like all types of things. I'm not the type of person who just wants one type of film every time I go into the theaters. This type of superhero film, I'm fine with. And it honestly was nice to have a superhero film that is more like a generic superhero film, which sounds bad on paper. Like, why would I want the movie to be generic? But when you think of recent comic book films over the past couple years, a lot of them have been trying to do a lot. Like, there's huge things going on. You got Spider-Man No Way Home, multiverse. You got Doctor Strange 2, multiverse. You got Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, a brand new big villain in the quantum realm. Black Panther: Wakanda Forever was a much more serious story and had to do with, honoring the legacy of Chadwick Boseman. Thor 4 was, otherworldly type stuff. Like, all of it hasn't felt like just, your on-Earth superhero film like we used to have all the time. This is the first one we've had of that in quite some time. So in that way, I actually really enjoyed it. It just felt like a classic superhero film. And I'm fine with that. A lot of people right now are talking about superhero fatigue, but this one didn't really fatigue me because it doesn't really feel like the past couple superhero movies we've had. It doesn't feel anything like them. Yes, it feels like a lot of the ones that came, years before, but in terms of the ones that came out the past couple years, no, it kind of feels quite new to me, and I think it was refreshing. I'm glad this one gave a lot of time for Billy to shine as Shazam. I was kind of worried after the first one that the sequel was going to be more about all of the kids being superheroes the whole time, and I will say they do not do that. It's not going to be the kids being superheroes the entire film. There is a lot of time for Billy to just be doing Shazam stuff on his own. I won't, give spoilers into how that's going to work, but if you want to see, Billy as Shazam on his own, he is going to be doing that. It's not going to be a team-up movie for the entire time, which I thought was a good thing because I really like Billy as Shazam, and I do think having him have his own moments is a good thing. You don't want to have him be with the team, possibly being outshined by other members of the team, because that could happen. And back on the topic of what I was talking about before with this feeling like just a normal superhero film, you do get a lot of normal superhero things like them rescuing people, which that doesn't sound like it should be a positive, but again, if you look at the recent superhero films, how often are they rescuing people? Yeah, they might be rescuing people in a very different context, like other creatures in the quantum realm. That's very different. But this is just very standard, situations in Philadelphia. People are getting attacked by whatever, or stuff's collapsing, buildings are falling, and you got people saving people. To me, that's entertaining. It's your typical superhero stuff. and it worked for me. I actually do like some of Billy's character in this film because some of it does bring his character full circle compared to the first one, and I really liked his story in the first one. I thought that was the best thing about it, with him, of course, being abandoned by his mother and just never even knowing his father. And the whole movie, he's trying to find his mother, and then he learns that she doesn't actually want him. Like, she does not want anything to do with him, and that breaks his heart. And then he finds this family that actually genuinely does care about him. And he has a lot of good moments with the characters in this film, especially the woman, forget her name, I think it's Rosa. And she was great, and she had a couple of nice moments with him, and I thought it was good. It brought his character full circle for me, and that worked. And they did a couple other things with him that I also really liked. And even talking about the other kids, like Freddie especially, Freddie had a lot to do in this movie. Darla had a couple of nice moments like she did in the first one. She was probably one of the highlights of the first one, so it was nice to see her a lot more in this one. And then, of course, Eugene, Pedro, and Mary, they all were good. I enjoy those characters. They're not that deep, they're not that in depth, but when they do have them on screen, they're entertaining. They have good line delivery, and they're fun to watch. There's a huge focus on mythology in this film. Obviously, the title is Fury of the Gods, and the story behind it actually makes a lot of sense. And I'm not that well versed in mythology, but I have heard that a lot of the elements of mythology in this film are actually quite accurate to mythology, so I thought that was cool. There's a lot of interesting mythological creatures that show up in this film, especially like they have a dragon in one part of it, which I absolutely loved everything with that dragon. And that's not a spoiler because that was in the trailers, but that dragon was awesome. That thing was cool to watch. It actually looked pretty good. The visual effects were all really good, so that stuff was cool. The action itself is quite decent. It's not absolutely outstanding or the best stuff you'll ever see in a comic book film, but it's fine. It's manageable. It works. And the comedy actually works more than it does in a lot of other superhero films. And I think the reason why that's the case is because Shazam is supposed to be a funny film, and when you go into it expecting comedy, it works a lot better than when you're watching a film that you think shouldn't have as much comedy, and it does throw in a lot of comedy. Like Thor, I never thought should have been a comedic character. Thor does not really lend well to comedy. It did in Ragnarok. I don't know how they made it work there, but then you see it in Love and Thunder, and it just does not work that well. A lot of it doesn't. Same thing with Ant-Man 3, like a lot of the comedy just does not work. I just don't think these characters should have as much comedy thrown into it as they do. But Shazam, especially even the first one, it was always a comedy to me, so I felt like the comedy worked pretty decently. A lot of it is childish humor, but you gotta lighten up a little bit. Sometimes childish humor is funny. But that takes us into the negatives, and one of my biggest negatives with this movie is actually Zachary Levi as Billy, and not the acting. I don't think it's the acting, because I don't believe that he did this on purpose. I do think this is just how the character was written, so he had to do it. But it is very jarring in this film to watch Zachary Levi as Billy act so differently than, I don't know the actor's name who plays young Billy, but the version of young Billy, he is so different than Zachary Levi's Billy in this film. So different. In the first one, it worked, right? He was much more childish in the first one when he was younger, and so having this child in a older person's body, it made sense why he would act the way he did in that first one, and it all worked for me completely. But in this one, the few scenes they have of young Billy, he is very mature. He's older now too. He's like 17 or 18. He's very mature. He never has any sort of jokey moments or anything like that. He acts very mature. So when he transitions to being the older version, who of course Zachary Levi is playing, it is very jarring because all of a sudden he's cracking jokes, he's being all like a smart ass, like he's being childish, and it doesn't really fit. If they just made the younger version not have matured so much, maybe if he was still all silly and goofy, maybe it would work better. But he has such a different personality, and it's very jarring to see that transition. And even so for some of the other kids, because even Darla, she was a lot younger in the first one, and they don't show much of her in this one when she's a kid, but she definitely has matured a bit. But the older version, it looks so ridiculous the way she acts. It's like, I don't believe this girl still acts like that anymore. Like, I just don't believe that. And the same could be applied for some of the other characters. I think for Freddy, it worked just fine. He acted just like his older version completely. Pedro, for the most part, too. Like, that works fine. But it did not work for Billy whatsoever, and it was probably the most jarring part. I don't think it's Zachary Levi's acting, because he's a good actor. It's just they didn't write that character well to transition into the older version. It just did not work. And although I love the mythological aspects of this film, the villains that were tied to that, I didn't really care for. Like, I tried to care, I tried to be interested in their story. It makes sense and it definitely works well off of the first film, but I just could not get into them. Of course, you had Hespera and Calypso. They were just boring to me. I don't know, I didn't find anything about them to be that interesting. They're very Shakespearean, which made sense, but most of the story revolves around these characters and I just could not really care for it too much. And then you have Anne in this film. Of course, she's the character played by Rachel Zegler. There's moments in this film I liked her character and her connection to Freddy, and there's other moments where there was something off. I don't want to say it was her acting. I always hate to jump to just blaming the acting for why a character fell off to me, because it might not be the acting. It could just be the writing for it. It could be the dialogue. I'm not sure. But a lot of her character just fell off to me for a lot of the film, and I could never fully get into her motivations for really anything. Like, everything with her, I was just like, I don't really know what she wants here. What does she want? What is she trying to do? None of it really worked for me. And although I said I like the comedy in this film, that does not mean it always works. There's a lot of moments where there's a serious moment and it's just killed by comedy. It's a comedy, so you're expecting a lot of it, but that does not mean you need it in the serious moments too. You know, you gotta let the moments breathe a little bit, but they just throw in a joke or something and it's like, why? You could have just had that moment stay like that and it would have worked so much better, but they had to throw in a joke and I'm just like, why do you do that? So now it's time to give this movie a rating out of 10. Like I said, I will be going into some spoilers after I give the rating, but for those of you who don't want to watch the spoilers, you could just hear my rating. I'm going to give it a 7.2 out of 10, which is a decent score. Just if you want to compare that to Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, I gave that film a 6.8. So this I liked a little bit more. I feel like my mindset is a lot more positive just because I was expecting something much worse and it ended up being a lot better than what I thought it was going to be, whereas for Ant-Man 3 it was a lot worse than I thought it was going to be. So even though they're pretty close in terms of their ratings, I still felt like I enjoyed this one a lot more, and I had a better mindset of it. So now let's get into spoilers. So of course, if you haven't seen the film, you probably shouldn't watch this segment unless you do not care and you just like spoilers and whatever. Let's just keep watching. So first, let's talk about the fact that Shazam, Billy dies and then comes back to life. Now, I don't really know how that works. Why did he come back to life, or did he die at all? I don't really know. But regardless, I was genuinely really shocked in that moment because at first I was like, oh, they're just joking around. Like, he's gonna be fine, obviously. And then they kept playing it out. I'm like, wait, he's actually dead? And in that moment, I was probably gonna give this movie a higher score because there is a lot of uncertainty as to whether or not this character is going to return in the future. So I thought maybe they just kept talking about that because they didn't want to spoil the fact that this might be the last Shazam film they do. So I was like, wait, is he going to die here? That would actually be a really crazy way to end it, really ballsy way to end it. And then I started thinking to myself, maybe a new Shazam could take over. Maybe the actor doesn't want to continue, so they can do a new Shazam. They can do all sorts of things, right? So killing him off to me was not a crazy concept. I was like, wait, at first I didn't think it was going to happen, but then I was like, actually, hold on, that actually makes sense and that could work. And he poofs right out, he's still alive. I'm like, oh, come on. Like, it kind of ruined the moment a little bit. Like, why even fake us out? You didn't really get me emotional. I wasn't emotional because, first of all, I'm not that attached to this character. And second of all, like I said, I was not expecting him to die at all. Anyways, I was expecting for a lot of that beginning part I was expecting him to live anyways. So, I don't know, it was a weird sort of thing they did, and they made a whole joke out of it when he returned. It was kind of a bit too much for me, honestly. And if he doesn't return, if he never does return, if Zachary Levi never returns as Shazam after this film, then they should have killed him off. They should have had that happen. They should have left it like that. If he does return, then I guess it's fine because I do want to see him come back. So it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I'm fine because I do want to see more of him come back. But if he was not going to come back, then yeah, you should have probably just left it with him dead. Of course, we also have the Wonder Woman cameo, which I wanted to keep this for the spoilers because although it was in 1 or 2 TV spots for the film, it was not in most of the trailers. So most people probably don't know about it. And I don't want to, give it away for people who aren't expecting this cameo. And I liked the little cameo, but like, it just felt weird because they had her earlier in the movie. Wonder Woman was in an earlier part of the film and she was just not like there. I don't know why they did that. They could have just, if they were able to get her for the end of the film, why couldn't they have her shoot that one scene for the other part of the film? I don't know. I guess it was a joke because they were trying to make it seem like, oh, they don't have enough money to, get Gal Gadot for this scene, so let's make it this really stupid, like almost like She-Hulk, how they have a lot of self-aware humor in She-Hulk. I thought this was kind of maybe a self-aware comedy type thing for like, oh, they couldn't get Gal Gadot, so they did some stupid body double thing. But I never like self-aware jokes. It just never works for me, because yes, you're being self-aware, but you're still doing the thing that you're making fun of. If you're still doing the thing that you're making fun of, it doesn't work. It just doesn't. This isn't a spoof movie. If it's Cat in the Hat or fucking Austin Powers, sure, you can do it, but it's not. It's a superhero movie set in the DC universe. I don't want stupid stuff like that. You could have just had her in that scene. It would have worked just fine. And on top of that, why put it in any of the TV spots? Thankfully, I didn't see any of those TV spots. I think I heard rumors of her coming into the film, but I didn't see the actual TV spots. And I'm glad I didn't, but for most people, I think it was actually a nice cameo, but you kind of ruined it in some of the TV spots for a lot of people. So that's weird to me. I don't get that. And there was the 2 after credits scene. The first one, of course, he was just being asked by, don't remember the characters' names, but James Gunn's wife's character and then the other guy from Peacemaker, they return and they ask him to join the Justice Society. I thought that was a funny scene because he thought they were going to say Justice League and he got all excited, but it just turns out it's the Justice Society, which honestly I was confused at by first, because I was like, wait, are they saying Justice League? Why would they have anything to do with Justice League? And then I was like, okay, Justice Society, that makes more sense. And then you also had the other scene with the caterpillar returning from the first after credit scene from the first Shazam. It didn't really do anything for me. It didn't really hype me up for anything. I'm not a comic reader of Shazam, so I don't know any of Shazam's villains. I don't know who the caterpillar is. I'm sure for people who know what it is, maybe there's something to be excited for there, but I don't know. It didn't really do anything for me. I think chances are they will be returning Zachary Levi as Shazam for the future DC films in James Gunn's new DC universe after Flash completely resets everything. I think he'll return, and I think they're going to do something with that caterpillar. They're probably going to do something with him being a part of the Justice Society. I'm excited for that. I'm looking forward to it. I think this film was decent. Like I said, 7.2 out of 10. That's a decent score. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Did you love this movie? Did you hate it? Or did you not see it at all? Let me know. Peace out, everyone.